when my daughter stood in front of 200 wedding guests and announced that her real family was her new husband's parents, not me. I smiled gracefully and lifted my champagne glass. No one in that gilded ballroom knew that I was sitting on $7 million, and thank God for that, because what happened over the next 6 months showed me exactly who my daughter really was. My name is Me, and this is a story about the most painful blessing I've ever received. It's about discovering that sometimes the people who should love us most are the ones waiting for us to fall. And it's about learning that silence, when used wisely, is the most powerful weapon you'll ever hold. Let me take you back to where this all started, not at the wedding, but 2 years before, when my husband Richard passed away and left me with a secret that would change everything. For 37 years, Richard and I built a quiet life together. He was a patent attorney, brilliant, meticulous, and intensely private about money. We lived comfortably in a modest 3-bedroom home in the suburbs. I worked as a school librarian until I retired at 62. We drove sensible cars, took 1 vacation a year, and saved diligently. Our daughter Monica grew up with everything she needed, but not everything she wanted. Richard believed in teaching her the value of money. "Mia," he'd say, folding his newspaper at the breakfast table, "the greatest gift we can give Monica is knowing how to stand on her own 2 feet. I agreed with him then. I still do now, though for very different reasons. Monica was our only child. I'd had complications after her birth that made more children impossible, so we poured everything into her. Dance lessons, college tuition, help with her first apartment after graduation. When she started her marketing career, we celebrated every promotion. When she met Brandon at an industry conference 3 years ago, we welcomed him in our family with open arms. Richard passed away suddenly in March of 2024. A massive heart attack in his study, paperwork spread across his desk, reading glasses still perched on his nose. He was 68 years old. I was 65 and suddenly, devastatingly alone. Monica came to stay with me for a week after the funeral. She helped sort through Richard's clothes, organized the sympathy cards, sat with me during the long, hollow evenings. I was grateful for her presence. Brandon came too on the weekends, always polite, always offering to help with yard work or repairs. "Mom, you don't have to rush into any decisions," Monica said one evening as we sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made her school lunches for 12 years. "About the house, I mean, or Dad's things. Take your time." "I know, sweetheart," I said, squeezing her hand. "I'm just taking it one day at a time." What I didn't tell her, what I didn't tell anyone, was what Richard's attorney, Gerald Morrison, had revealed to me 3 days after the funeral. Gerald had been Richard's friend for 40 years. He'd called and asked to meet with me privately at his office downtown. I'd assumed it was routine estate matters. I was wrong, me, Gerald had said, sliding a leather portfolio across his mahogany desk. Richard was very specific about how he wanted this handled. He made me promise not to reveal the full extent of his estate until, after the funeral, when you'd had time to grieve. I'd opened the portfolio with shaking hands. Page after page of investment accounts, stock portfolios, real estate holdings I'd never heard of. Patents Richard had sold years ago that continued generating royalties. A life insurance policy worth $2 million alone. The total came to just over $7 million. I'd stared at those numbers until they blurred. "Gerald, this can't be right. We lived so, modestly." "That was Richard's way," Gerald said gently. "He wanted to ensure your security, but didn't believe in flashy displays of wealth. Me, he set this up very carefully. The bulk of it is in a trust with you as the primary beneficiary. There's a provision for Monica, $500,000 to be dispersed when she turns 35, which I believe is next year." "Why 35?" I'd asked. "Richard's instructions say when she's mature enough to handle it wisely." Those were his exact words. Gerald had leaned forward, his expression serious. Me, Richard also left specific instructions about disclosure. He suggested you take your time deciding who to tell and when. He said, and I quote, "Me will know who deserves to know and who doesn't." trust her judgment above all else. Sitting in that office, I'd felt a strange mixture of grief and gratitude. Even in death, Richard was protecting me, guiding me, trusting me. I'd thanked Gerald and left with the portfolio. I'd driven home in my 12-year-old sedan, pulled into the driveway of my modest house, and walked inside carrying the weight of $7 million in paperwork. And I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to tell anyone, not yet. Looking back now, I understand that something in my gut was already warning me. Small things I'd noticed over the years but dismissed. Way Monica would comment on other people's homes, their cars, their vacations with a tone that was just a shade too envious. How she'd once said, "You and Dad could afford better, you know. You just choose not to," as if our choices were somehow an embarrassment to her. The way Brandon's eyes would linger on expensive watches in store windows, or how he'd mentioned casually that his parents had set him up well with a trust fund, but these were just shadows then, easily explained away by normal human weakness, by a young couple trying to build their life. I'd told Monica that her father had left us comfortable, and that there would be something for her eventually. She'd nodded, hugged me, and said, "I'm just glad you'll be okay, Mom." I'd believed her. For 6 months after Richard's death, I maintained my routine. I kept the house. I drove the same car. I bought my groceries with coupons and shopped the clearance racks at department stores. Just as I always had. The only difference was the profound loneliness that echoed through every room, and the secret that sat in a safe deposit box at First National Bank. Monica called me every few days. Those first months, we'd talk about her work, her life with Brandon, small things, but I noticed something shifting. The conversations grew shorter, more distracted. She was busy, she said, planning for the future. Then in September, she and Brandon came to visit. They sat me down in my living room, on the same floral sofa where Monica had done her homework as a teenager, and they told me that we're getting engaged. Mom, we want to do this right. Monica said, her eyes bright with excitement, a real wedding, the kind of celebration that brings families together. Brandon nodded, his arm around her shoulders. We've been looking at venues. There's this beautiful estate about an hour from here. It's perfect, me. 200 guests, gardens, a ballroom. I'd smiled, genuinely happy for them. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. When are you thinking? Next June, Monica said. That gives us 9 months to plan. She'd paused, then added, Mom, I know this is a lot. And I know money might be tight for you now with just Dad's pension and Social Security. My chest had tightened slightly. I'm managing fine, honey. Well, we were thinking. Brandon's parents have generously offered to cover most of the wedding costs. They're so excited about this. His mom has already started planning. Monica had reached over and squeezed my hand. I didn't want you to feel pressured to contribute a lot. Maybe you could cover the rehearsal dinner. Something small, just close family. Would that work? The rehearsal dinner, something small. I'd felt something flicker in my chest, not hurt exactly, but a kind of cautious awareness, of course. I'd said, I'd be honored to host the rehearsal dinner. You're the best, Mom, Monica had said, kissing my cheek. Brandon's parents are contributing so much. His dad owns those car dealerships, you know, and they really want to make this special for us. I'm so lucky to have such generous in-laws. She'd said it so innocently, but there was something in the emphasis, such generous in-laws, that had landed differently than she'd perhaps intended. Brandon had jumped in quickly. We're lucky to have both our families, Mon. Your mom has always been so supportive, but the moment had passed and I dismissed it. She was young, excited, overwhelmed with planning. Of course, Brandon's wealthy parents would want to contribute substantially. I was happy they could give their son this gift. I was happy I didn't have to. Over the next 9 months, as Monica planned her wedding, I watched something shift in my daughter. The phone calls became less about how I was doing and more about wedding details. Not asking my opinion, mind you, but informing me of decisions already made. Brandon's mom found the most amazing florist, Mom. Wait until you see the arrangements. Brandon's parents insisted on flying in their preferred photographer from New York. He shot celebrity weddings. Brandon's mom and I went dress shopping in the city. She knows all the best boutiques. Each conversation, Barbara, Brandon's mother, loomed larger while I seemed to grow smaller. I told myself it was natural. The groom's family was paying for most of it. They had more experience with large events. They were excited. But there was something else creeping in, something I felt in my bones during those long, distance phone calls. Monica was auditioning for a new family, and I was becoming a supporting character in my own daughter's life. I planned the rehearsal dinner as promised. I chose a lovely private room at a nice restaurant, arranged for a menu that would please everyone, and spent $3,000 of my modest budget to make sure it was perfect. Monica had been pleased. "Thanks, Mom. That's really nice of you. Nice of me." To host my own daughter's rehearsal dinner. The wedding itself was in June, exactly as planned. I drove myself to the venue, that beautiful estate with its manicured gardens and soaring ballroom. I wore a dress I'd found on sale, elegant but understated. I'd offered to help with setup, but Barbara had informed me, kindly but firmly, that she'd hired a coordinator and everything was handled. I'd sat in the third row during the ceremony, not the first row, which I'd assumed would be for parents. The first row was reserved for Barbara and Robert, Brandon's parents. I was placed behind Brandon's siblings and their spouses. When I'd quietly mentioned this to the usher, he'd checked his seating chart and said, "This is what the bride requested, ma'am." The bride. My daughter. I'd sat in that third row and watched Monica walk down the aisle, walked by Robert, not by herself as she'd told me she wanted, feminist and independent. And I'd felt something crack in my chest. Just a small fissure, barely noticeable. The ceremony was beautiful. The reception was lavish. Crystal chandeliers, 5-course meal, a band that had played at Governor's fundraisers. I smiled and congratulated guests, and pretended not to notice how often I was introduced as Monica's mom. While Barbara was introduced as practically the mother of the bride, she planned this whole beautiful event. Then came the toasts. Brandon's best man spoke, funny, warm, appropriate. Monica's maid of honor spoke, sweet, slightly tearful, lovely. Then Brandon's father, Robert, stood up, microphone in hand. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Barbara and I couldn't be happier to welcome Monica into our family. From the moment Brandon brought her home, we knew she was special. We knew she was the daughter we'd never had." The audience had made appreciative sounds. I'd smiled, because what else could I do? Robert had continued, "We're so grateful that Monica has found not just a husband in Brandon, but a whole family who will love her, support her, and be there for her in every way she needs. Welcome to the family, Monica. You're ours now." The applause had been thunderous. I'd clapped too, my hands moving automatically while something cold settled in my stomach. Then Monica had stood up. She shouldn't have. There was no toast scheduled for the bride, but she'd taken the microphone from Robert with tears in her eyes and said, "I just have to say something." The room had fallen silent, anticipatory. When I met Brandon 3 years ago, I didn't just fall in love with him. I fell in love with his family. Monica's voice had been thick with emotion. "Barbara and Robert, you've shown me what it means to be truly supported, truly celebrated. You've given me opportunities and experiences I never dreamed of. You've welcomed me with open arms and open hearts." She'd paused, looking directly at Barbara, who was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "I know my own mother did her best." Monica had continued, and those words, "did her best," had landed like stones in my chest. She raised me with good values and taught me to work hard. But being part of this family has shown me what's possible when you dream bigger, when you don't limit yourself. The room had been utterly silent now. I could feel people's eyes sliding toward me, then quickly away. So I just want to say in front of all of you that I'm so grateful to have found my real family, the family that truly understands me and supports my dreams. Barbara and Robert, Thank you for being the parents I needed." She'd raised her glass. 200 people had raised theirs in response, and I'd sat there in the third row in my clearin' strack dress, holding my champagne glass and smiling gracefully because 37 years with Richard had taught me the power of dignity in devastating moments. My real family, the parents I needed. I'd excused myself shortly after and found a quiet corner in the garden. My hands had been shaking, not from anger, not yet from shock, from the profound disorientation of hearing your only child, daughter you'd loved and nurtured and sacrificed for, publicly declare that you weren't enough, that you had never been enough. I'd stood there among the roses, their sweet scent cloying in the humid June air, and I'd thought about the $7 million sitting in accounts and trusts with my name on them, the $500,000 that Richard had set aside for Monica, to be dispersed when she turned 35 and was mature enough to handle it wisely. Oh, Richard, you knew something, didn't you? I'd stayed until it was appropriate to leave. I'd hugged Monica goodbye, told her the wedding was beautiful. She'd been flushed with champagne and happiness and hadn't seemed to notice or care. That my hug was stiffer than usual, that my smile didn't reach my eyes. I'd driven home alone in darkness and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to go inside. Inside, where every room reminded me of the life Richard and I had built. The life that apparently hadn't been good enough for our daughter. But here's what I didn't do that night. I didn't cry myself to sleep. I didn't call Monica and demand an explanation. I didn't tell her about the money in a fit of hurt pride. I sat in Richard's study, in his leather chair that still faintly smelled of his cologne, and I thought about his final instructions. Me will know who deserves to know and who doesn't. Trust her judgment above all else. And I made a decision to wait, to watch, to see what happened next. What happened next was worse than I could have imagined. The first week after the honeymoon, Monica called me. "Mom, hi, we're back from the Maldives. It was incredible. Brandon's parents gifted us the trip, 10 days in an overwater villa." "Can you believe it? That's wonderful, sweetheart," I'd said, watering my tomato plants in the backyard. "I'm glad you had a good time." "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something." Monica's tone had shifted, businesslike now. "Brandon and I have been discussing our future, and we've decided we want to buy a house. A real house, not another apartment. And Barbara suggested we look in Willow Creek. Willow Creek was the wealthy enclave about 30 minutes from the city. Houses there started at $1 million and went up from there, way up. "That's ambitious," I'd said carefully. "We can afford it. Brandon got promoted to senior account director, and his parents are willing to help with the down payment." "But here's the thing, Mom. We were talking with Barbara and Robert, and they suggested that maybe you should consider downsizing." My hand had frozen on the watering can. Downsizing. "Your house, Mom. It's way too big for just you. 3 bedrooms, that big yard you never use, and honestly, with Dad gone, doesn't it just feel empty? Barbara thought maybe you could sell it and buy a nice condo, something more manageable. Then you could help us with our down payment." The water from the can had overflowed the tomato pot, flooding onto the patio. I'd turned off the flow carefully, precisely. "Help you with your down payment," I'd repeated. "I know it's a big ask." Monica had continued, warming to her subject now. "But think about it, Mom. You don't need all that space, and a condo would be so much easier. No yard work, no maintenance. You could find something really nice for, what, $200,000, maybe less. That would free up at least $150,000 from your house sale, maybe more. That would be an amazing down payment help for us. My house. The house Richard and I had bought 32 years ago, where we'd brought Monica home from the hospital. Where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesday evenings. The house that was part of the $7 million estate Richard had carefully built and protected. "Let me think about it," I'd said, my voice remarkably steady. "Don't take too long, Mom. The market is really competitive right now, and we want to move fast on the right property. Barbara's already connected us with a realtor. She's a shark, in a good way." After we'd hung up, I'd stood in my garden for a long time. The tomatoes were thriving. The roses Richard had planted were in full bloom. The apple tree we'd put in the year Monica turned 10 was heavy with fruit. I thought about Monica's words, "You don't need all that space." What I needed, apparently, was irrelevant. What mattered was what Monica wanted, what Barbara thought, what would benefit the new family, the real family Monica had joined. I called Gerald Morrison the next morning. "Gerald, it's me. I need to ask you something about Richard's instructions." "Of course, me. What's on your mind? Did Richard ever talk to you about Monica, about concerns he might have had?" There was a pause. Then Gerald said carefully, "Richard loved his daughter, but he was a shrewd man, me. He saw how she was with money, always wanting more, always comparing what she had to what others had. That's why he set up her inheritance the way he did. 35 years old, and even then with stipulations about financial counseling before dispersal. He never told me that part. About the financial counseling requirement. He didn't want you to feel caught in the middle. But yes, before Monica can access her $500,000, she has to complete a financial literacy course and meet with a fiduciary advisor. Richard's instructions are very clear. I want to ensure my daughter understands the value of money before she has access to significant sums." I'd closed my eyes. "Oh, Richard, you were protecting her, protecting us both. Gerald, I need you to do something for me. I need you to draw up documents that separate my assets completely from anything that could be considered joint or accessible. Everything in my name only, no beneficiaries listed, maximum privacy protections. Me, are you all right? I'm fine. I'm just being careful. Consider it done. And me, Richard's final note to me, the one I wasn't supposed to give you unless you asked specifically about protecting your assets." Gerald had paused. He wrote, "If me asks about this, tell her I always knew she was the strongest person I'd ever met. Trust her instincts." I'd hung up and sat at my kitchen table for a long time, the same table where I'd served Monica breakfast before school for 12 years, where we'd done art projects and homework and had Mother. Otter talks about everything from friendship problems to college decisions. When had I lost her? Or had I ever really had her in the way I thought I did? Over the next 2 months, Monica called regularly, but never to ask how I was doing. Always about the house. "Mom, have you thought more about downsizing?" "Mom, Barbara's realtor says the market is peaking. Now would be a great time to sell." "Mom, Brandon and I found the perfect house in Willow Creek. 4 bedrooms, incredible kitchen, right in the neighborhood where all the young professionals are moving. But we need to act fast, and we're just a little short on the down payment." Each call, the pressure increased. Each call, the expectation grew clearer. I was supposed to liquidate my life, my home, my memories to fund their dreams. Then, in late September, Monica and Brandon showed up at my house unannounced on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garden, harvesting tomatoes, when I heard the call. "Pull up, Mom, we're here." Monica called, coming through the side gate. Barbara was with them. I'd straightened up, wiping my hands on my garden apron. "This is a surprise. We wanted to see you," Monica said brightly. And Barbara suggested we could take a look at the house together. You know, objectively assess what might need to be done before putting it on the market. "I haven't decided to sell," I'd said quietly. Barbara had stepped forward, all smiles and designer sunglasses. "Me, dear, Monica has told me so much about this lovely home. May we look around? I have quite a bit of experience in real estate investment, and I'd be happy to give you some pointers on maximizing your sale price." What could I say? They were already walking toward the back door. For the next hour, I'd followed them through my own home while Barbara made notes on her phone and Monica pointed out issues. "This carpet is really dated, Mom. You'd need to replace it. The kitchen could use updating. Those cabinets are so 90s. The master bathroom definitely needs work." Barbara had nodded along, adding her professional assessment. "Me, I'd estimate you'd need to invest about $20,000 in updates to get top dollar. But in this neighborhood, I'd say you could get $350,000, maybe $400 if we're lucky. $400,000 for a house that Richard and I had paid off completely. That was worth, according to the current appraisal Gerald had gotten, $475,000. And then Monica had continued, her eyes bright with plans I hadn't approved. You could get a really nice condo for under $200,000. Mom, think of it. No yard work, maybe a pool and gym in the building. Other people your age around. Wouldn't that be better than rattling around in this big empty house? Other people my age. I was 67 years old. She talked as if I were ancient, ready for a senior community, rather than a woman who still worked part-time at the library, who volunteered at the food bank, who was taking Italian lessons online just for fun. And the difference, Brandon had added, glancing at Barbara as if for approval, would give us exactly what we need for the down payment. We'd pay you back, of course, once our careers really take off, of course. Once their careers took off. Just like the $20,000 I'd lent Monica for her first car after college, which she'd never paid back because I was building my career, Mom, and I thought you understood. I'd smiled at them all standing in my living room, these three people so certain of my compliance, so confident in their plan. Let me think about it, I'd said. Monica's face had fallen slightly. Mom, we can't wait too long. The house we want won't stay on the market forever. Then I suppose you'll have to figure out another solution. I'd said gently but firmly. The atmosphere had shifted. Barbara had exchanged a look with Monica. Brandon had cleared his throat awkwardly. Mom, Monica had said, her voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. Are you being serious right now? You won't help us. I didn't say that. I said I need time to think. Time to think about what? You don't need this house. You have no one here. Dad's gone. I've moved out. You're just being stubborn. The word stubborn had echoed in the room. I think it's time for you to leave. I'd said quietly. They'd left, but not before Barbara had placed a hand on Monica's arm and said, loud enough for me to hear, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Sometimes older people get set in their ways. She'll come around once she realizes what's in everyone's best interest." I'd stood at my window and watched them drive away in Brandon's BMW, a gift from his parents for his 30th birthday. And I'd made a phone call. Gerald, I need you to do something else for me. I want to set up an irrevocable trust for the house. I want to ensure that no matter what happens, no one can pressure me into selling it or using it as collateral. That's a smart move. Are you experiencing pressure? Let's just say I'm being proactive. Over the next few weeks, Monica's calls became less frequent, but more pointed. When she did call, it wasn't to chat. It was to remind me about our plan, about how I was holding them back, about how other parents supported their children's dreams. Then, in early November, I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. That was unusual. Despite everything, we'd maintained some contact. I almost called her, worried. Then I received a letter in the mail. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. I'd opened it standing in my hallway, my reading glasses perched on my nose, and I'd felt my blood run cold. Dear Mrs. Patterson, we represent Monica Patterson. Hayes and Brandon Hayes in a matter concerning your property at 847 Maple Drive. Our clients have indicated that prior to his death, your late husband Richard Patterson made verbal promises to assist them with their first home purchase. As his primary beneficiary, you inherited the obligation to fulfill these promises. Our clients propose that you consider the sale of the above-mentioned property and the contribution of $150,000 toward their home purchase as fulfillment of these obligations. Alternatively, they would accept a secured loan against your property for the same amount. Please contact our office within 10 business days to discuss this matter. Failure to respond may result in further legal action. My daughter had sent me a legal demand letter. My daughter, who I had carried for 9 months, who I had nursed through midnight fevers and First heartbreaks and college finals stress my daughter, whose wedding rehearsal dinner I had hosted just 5 months ago. She had sent lawyers after me. I'd sat down on the stairs, that letter clutched in my hand, and for the first time since Richard's death, I'd wept, not from sadness, from a grief so profound it felt like a physical wound, because I understood in that moment that I had lost my daughter years ago. I was only just now realizing it. When I could breathe again, I called Gerald. They've made a mistake. I'd told him, my voice hoarse but steady.
A very big mistake. What do you need me to do, Me? I need you to respond to this letter. I need you to make it clear that Richard made no such promises.
I need documentation of his estate, his intentions, his explicit instructions, and Gerald, I need you to prepare something else. What's that? I need you to prepare documents that show exactly what Monica is giving up by doing this. Because I want her to understand the consequences of her choices. Gerald had been quiet for a moment. Me, are you sure? Once we go down this path, I'm sure. Richard trusted my judgment. I'm using it. Within 3 days, Gerald had responded to Monica's lawyers with a 15-page letter documenting Richard's estate planning, his explicit instructions, and the complete absence of any promises regarding home purchases. The letter concluded with a firm statement: Mrs. Patterson has no legal, moral, or ethical obligation to fund her daughter's lifestyle choices. Any further harassment will be considered elder financial abuse and will be reported to the appropriate authorities. I'd thought that would be the end of it. I'd thought surely Monica would realize she'd gone too far, that she'd be embarrassed, that she'd apologize. I was wrong. Instead, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I found a photo of me in my garden, taken from the street with the caption, "Selfish old woman sits on money while her daughter struggles." Then another text, this time from Monica's number. "You're going to regret this, Mom. You think you can just cut me off. I'm your only daughter, your only family. You're going to die alone in that house and no one will care." I'd stared at those words until they blurred. Your only family. That night, I'd pulled out my wedding album, the one with the beautiful leather cover that Richard had custom mortared. I'd looked at the photos of Monica getting ready, Monica walking down the aisle, Monica dancing with Brandon. And I'd noticed something I hadn't seen before. In every photo, there was distance in her eyes when she looked at me. But when she looked at Barbara, at Robert, at Brandon's family, there was longing, aspiration, the look of someone who'd found what they'd been searching for all along. I'd never been enough for her, not because I hadn't loved her enough or given her enough, but because she'd decided that what we had, what Richard and I had built through hard work and careful planning, wasn't the life she wanted. She wanted the life Barbara and Robert had, the life of easy wealth and casual luxury, and she was willing to sacrifice me to get it. That's when I stopped grieving and started planning. I called a meeting with Gerald. I need to know my options, all of them. We'd met in his office on a gray November afternoon. Gerald had laid out everything, my assets, my rights, my legal protections, and then he'd shown me something I hadn't considered. Me, Richard's trust for Monica, has a provision I haven't mentioned before. If you determine, with documented evidence, that Monica is attempting to financially exploit you, you have the authority to revoke her inheritance entirely. The money would remain in the trust and eventually go to charity. Revoke it, all of it. All of it, but me, you'd need evidence, clear documentation of exploitation attempts, harassment, undue pressure. Do you have that? I'd pulled out my phone. The texts, the letters, the voicemails Monica had left, increasingly angry, demanding I do the right thing and stop being selfish. I'd documented every visit, every conversation, every demand. I've been keeping records, I'd said. I didn't know why at first, but something told me I might need them. Gerald had reviewed everything, his expression growing darker. Me, this is elder financial abuse. Textbook case and coming from your own daughter. He'd looked up at me. What do you want to do? I'd thought about Richard. about his final words to Gerald. Trust her judgment above all else. I want to give her one more chance, I'd said. One opportunity to recognize what she's doing and stop. If she doesn't take it, then I'll know for certain who she really is. I'd sent Monica a text message. I'd like to meet for coffee, just you and me. Thursday at 2 p.m. at Rosie's. Please come alone. She'd responded 3 hours later. Fine. Thursday afternoon, I'd arrived at Rosie's cafe early. It was the place Monica and I used to go when she was in high school, after shopping trips or just to talk. I'd sat at our old table by the window and waited. Monica had arrived 15 minutes late, sliding into the booth across from me without apology. She'd looked tired, I'd noticed, stressed, but there was a hardness in her expression I'd never seen before. What do you want, Mom? I want to talk to you, really talk to you, about what's been happening. She'd sighed, dramatic and impatient. If this is about the lawyer letter, Brandon's mom said it was the only way to get through to you. You wouldn't listen to reason. Barbara told you to hire lawyers to threaten your own mother. It's not a threat, it's just, we're trying to make you understand. You have money you don't need. We have needs you won't help with. It's not fair, Mom. I'd folded my hands on the table, fighting to keep my voice steady. Monica, tell me something. When did you decide I wasn't enough? She'd blinked. What? When did you decide that the life your father and I gave you, the values we taught you, the love we showed you, when did you decide it wasn't enough? Mom, don't make this about, because I need to know. Was it when you met Barbara, when you saw their house, their cars, their lifestyle? Or was it before that? Was it all those years when you looked at what we had and felt embarrassed? Monica's face had flushed. That's not fair. Your toast at your wedding, Monica, my real family. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Do you have any idea how it felt to hear my only child tell 200 people that I wasn't the parent she needed? I was emotional. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Yes, you did. I'd leaned forward. And everything since then has proven it. The demands that I sell my home, the lawyers, the harassment. Monica, you've tried to intimidate and manipulate your widowed mother into giving you money. Do you understand how serious that is? She'd looked away, jaw tight. Brandon's parents said you'd try to make us feel guilty. They said older people do that when they want to hold onto their money and control their kids. Barbara, always Barbara, Monica, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. If you found out tomorrow that I had no money at all, that your father left me just enough to get by, would you still want a relationship with me? The silence had stretched between us. I'd watched my daughter struggle with the question, seen something shift in her face. And then she'd said, in a voice so quiet I'd almost missed it, "That's a horrible thing to ask me, because you know the answer." I'd said softly, "And you don't like what it says about you?" She'd stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this. You're the one being selfish. You're the one who won't help your own daughter. Barbara was right about you. Barbara doesn't know me. But I'm starting to think she knows you better than I do." Monica had grabbed her purse. "When you're ready to stop being bitter and start being a real mother, call me. Until then, don't expect to hear from me." She'd walked out of the cafe. I'd sat there for a long time, my coffee growing cold, and I'd known. I'd given her the chance. She'd made her choice. I'd pulled out my phone and called Gerald. "Gerald, I need you to prepare the revocation documents, all of them. And I need you to do something else." "What's that, me?" "I need you to prepare a full disclosure statement. Everything Richard left me, every account, every asset, every dollar, because I want Monica to know exactly what she gave up when she chose greed." Over love, December passed. I heard nothing from Monica. No Christmas card, no phone call, nothing. I spent the holidays with my sister Janet, who'd flown in from Arizona. I told her everything. She'd held my hand and said, "Me, I'm so sorry, but maybe this is the blessing. Maybe you needed to see who she really was before you made any permanent decisions about your estate." On New Year's Eve, as I sat in my living room watching the countdown on TV, I thought about Richard. About how he'd worked so hard, saved so carefully, planned so meticulously to ensure I'd be taken care of. He'd known something about Monica that I'd refused to see. He'd tried to protect us both.
"Thank you," I'd whispered to his memory. "Thank you for trusting me to handle this." In January, Gerald completed all the documentation. The revocation of Monica's inheritance was final, with
detailed evidence of her financial exploitation attempts. The money that would have gone to her would now, upon my death, fund a scholarship program for first-generation college students at the state university where Monica had gone to school. Richard would have loved that irony. On January 15th, Monica turned 35 years old. According to Richard's original trust documents, that was the day she was supposed to be notified about her inheritance, the day she'd learn about the $500,000 waiting for her, contingent on financial counseling. Instead, Gerald sent her a different letter. I'd asked him to deliver it in person to her and Brandon's apartment in the city. He'd agreed, saying it was important that this be handled with gravity and official witness. I wasn't there, but Gerald told me later what happened. He'd arrived at their apartment at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. Monica had answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, clearly surprised. Brandon had been behind her. "Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Hayes, I'm Gerald Morrison, your late father's attorney. I need to speak with you both about your father's estate." They'd let him in. Gerald said Monica had actually smiled, relieved. She'd probably assumed this was about her inheritance finally coming through, maybe a belated birthday surprise. Gerald had sat across from them in their expensive living room, furnished, he noted, with items far beyond their actual earning power, and opened his briefcase. "Mrs. Hayes, when your father passed away in March of 2024, he left a comprehensive estate. I'm here today to inform you of your portion of that estate and the status of your inheritance." Monica had leaned forward, eager. Brandon had put his arm around her. "Your father set aside $500,000 for you to be dispersed on your 35th birthday, contingent on completion of financial literacy counseling and approval from a fiduciary advisor." Gerald said Monica's face had lit up. $500,000. "Oh my God, Brandon, did you hear that?" However, Gerald had continued, his voice taking on a formal tone. "Under the terms of the trust, your mother, as primary beneficiary and trust administrator, had the authority to revoke this inheritance under specific circumstances." The smile had started to fade. Those circumstances included documented evidence of financial exploitation, harassment, or undue pressure directed toward her for the purpose of accessing her assets. Monica had gone very still. "What are you saying?" Gerald had pulled out a thick folder. "I'm saying that over the past 6 months, you engaged in a systematic campaign to pressure your widowed mother into liquidating her primary residence and providing you with funds for your benefit. This included hiring attorneys to make false claims, sending harassing messages, making threats, and causing substantial emotional distress." He'd laid out the evidence. Every text message, every letter, every documented conversation, photos of the lawyer letters, transcripts of voicemails. On December 28, 2025, after providing you with one final opportunity to reconsider your actions, your mother exercised her authority and revoked your inheritance in its entirety. The silence in the room, Gerald said, was absolute. "This can't be legal." Brandon had said finally, "You can't just take away someone's inheritance." The trust was structured specifically to allow this. Richard Patterson was very clear in his intentions. He wanted to ensure his daughter was mature enough to handle significant wealth. Her actions proved she was not. Monica had stood up, her face white. "Where is the money going?" "To a scholarship fund in your father's name. First-generation college students who demonstrate financial need and strong character will receive full tuition assistance." No. Monica had started pacing. "This is Mom's doing. She's punishing me because I wouldn't play along with her controlling behavior." "Mrs. Hayes, your mother didn't create this situation. You did. Every action documented in this report was initiated by you or at your direction. How much? Brandon had asked suddenly. How much did me inherit? If there was enough to set aside $500,000 for Monica, what did she get? Gerald had stood, gathering his papers. That's confidential, but I can tell you this. Richard Patterson was a very successful man who lived modestly and planned carefully. Your assumption that Monica's mother was financially limited was incorrect. He'd handed Monica an official letter. This is your notification of inheritance revocation. You have the right to contest it, but I'll advise you that the documentation is extensive and conclusive. Any legal challenge would be expensive and ultimately unsuccessful. He'd walked to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Mrs. Hayes, your mother agonized over this decision. She gave you multiple chances. She hoped you'd realize what you were doing and stop, but you never did. Gerald said Monica had stood there, that letter in her hands, as he left. He could hear her starting to cry as he closed the door. That evening, my phone rang. Monica. I'd let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Monica. Mom. Her voice was thick with tears. Mom, please. We need to talk. We talked in November. You walked out. I didn't know. I didn't understand. Mom, the lawyer told me about Dad's estate. He said there's money, a lot of money. There is, I'd said calmly. Your father was very successful. He left me well provided for. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to see who you really were. And you showed me, Monica. Every day for 6 months, you showed me exactly who you are. I made mistakes. I was listening to the wrong people. Barbara and Robert, they were in my ear, telling me that family helps family, that you were holding out on me. And you believed them instead of trusting your own mother, instead of simply loving me for who I am, not what I could give you. Please, Mom, please don't do this. I need that money. We need it. We're in debt. The wedding cost more than we planned. The apartment is expensive. Brandon's promotion didn't come through like we thought. So all of this was about covering debt, about maintaining a lifestyle you couldn't actually afford. We were trying to build a life, the kind of life you and Dad never wanted. But just because you chose to live small doesn't mean I have to. And there it was. Even now, even after everything, she still didn't understand. Monica, your father, and I didn't live small. We lived wisely. We built security and stability and wealth that you never saw because we didn't need to show it off. The life you're trying to build with borrowed money and your in-laws' support isn't real. It's a performance, and I'm not funding the show. You're my mother. Yes, and you're my daughter. Which makes what you did even worse. You hired lawyers to threaten me, Monica, your own widowed mother. You tried to force me to sell my home. Do you have any idea how that felt? Silence. Then quietly, can I fix this? Is there any way to fix this? I'd closed my eyes, feeling tears on my cheeks. I don't know, maybe. But not with apologies motivated by finding out about money. Not with regret that only came after you realized what you lost. If you want to rebuild our relationship, it has to be because you genuinely understand what you did wrong and want to be a better person. Not because you want access to an inheritance. I do understand. I swear I do. Then prove it. Take some time. Figure out who you are without Barbara and Robert whispering in your ear. Build a life you can actually afford. Learn to stand on your own 2 feet the way your father always wanted you to, and maybe someday we can have a real relationship again, but not now, and not because of money. Mom, goodbye, Monica. I love you, I always have, but I won't let you use me anymore. I'd hung up, and this time I had cried. Not from anger or even sadness, but from release. From the profound relief of finally setting a boundary that should have been set years ago. It's been 6 months since that phone call. 6 months of silence from Monica, though I've heard through mutual friends that she and Brandon have moved to a smaller apartment. That they've started seeing a marriage counselor. That Monica has distanced herself somewhat from Barbara and Robert. I don't know if that's growth or just pragmatism. I don't know if she's learning or just regrouping. But I do know this, I'm at peace. I still live in my house, the one Richard and I built our life in. I've started traveling, something Richard and I always planned to do but never quite got around to. Last month, I spent 3 weeks in Italy, taking those language lessons in person this time. I ate pasta in Rome and watched the sunset over the canals in Venice and felt more alive than I had in years. I've started donating more actively to causes I care about, the library where I worked, the food bank where I volunteer, organizations that help women escaping financial abuse, because that's what Monica tried to do to me, and I won't pretend it was anything else. I've updated my will. The bulk of my estate will go to charities, with provisions for people who have shown me genuine love and kindness. My sister Janet, my friend Doris, who's been checking on me weekly since Richard died, Gerald's granddaughter, who wants to go to law school but can't afford it. Monica isn't in that will, not out of spite, but because I've learned the hardest lesson a parent can learn. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let your child face the consequences of their choices. Richard used to tell me, the best gift you can give someone is the truth, even when it hurts. I didn't understand what he meant then. I thought love meant protecting people from hard truths, smoothing rough edges, making things easier. But I understand now. Richard knew that Monica needed to learn the value of money, the meaning of work, the importance of character. He structured his estate to teach her that lesson, even from beyond the grave, and he trusted me to enforce it. The title of my story is My Daughter Got Married. She still doesn't know I inherited $7 million from my husband. Thank God. People might hear that and think the thank God is about having money. It's not. Thank God I didn't tell her. Thank God I waited. Thank God I saw who she really was before I made irreversible decisions. Thank God Richard was wise enough to build in protections and trust me to use them. Because if I had told Monica about the money right away, one of two things would have happened. Either she would have hidden her true nature, played the loving daughter just well enough to maintain access to wealth, or she would have accelerated her exploitation, knowing the stakes were higher. Instead, I got to see the truth. Painful, devastating, but ultimately liberating truth. I learned that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means strategy. I learned that love doesn't mean giving someone everything they want. It means giving them what they need, even if they hate you for it. I learned that being a good parent sometimes means being willing to be called a bad one. And I learned that at 7 years old, after 37 years of marriage and 35 years of motherhood, I still have the right to protect myself, to set boundaries, to say no. If you're listening to this and you're going through something similar, if you have children or relatives who see you as a resource rather than a person, if you're being pressured to give away your security to fund someone else's dreams, please know this. You don't owe anyone your stability. You don't owe anyone access to what you've worked for, saved for, and protected. Love doesn't come with price tags and invoices. I don't know what the future holds for Monica and me. Maybe she'll do the work and become someone I can trust again. Maybe this breach is permanent. Either way, I'll be okay. Because I have something more valuable than $7 million. I have my dignity, my peace, and the knowledge that I honored Richard's wishes and protected the legacy he built for me. My name is me. This is my story, and if you've heard yourself in it, please remember, you're not alone. You're not selfish. You're not wrong to protect yourself. Sometimes the greatest love is the love that knows when to say no. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Have you had to set boundaries with family? Have you had to choose yourself when someone you loved was taking advantage? You're not alone in this. So many of us have walked this road. Remember, every story has a lesson, and yours might be just beginning. But whatever chapter you're in, know this. You are valuable. You are worthy. and you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.